My old friend Sal called me at dawn. He runs the hardware store next to the depot. "Nathaniel," he said, "did you see the FCC filing?" I told him I hadn't. He said, "Someone's petitioning to sell the license for your station." I stood there holding the phone. My coffee went cold in my hand. I hadn't heard WKPN called an asset before. Before I tell you what I found in that filing, tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you've ever watched someone try to sell off the thing that held your whole town together, hit that like button. Subscribe to The Forgotten Father. This channel is for people who built things quietly and let the results speak for themselves. My name is Nathaniel Voss. I am 74 years old. For 40 years, I have run the transmitter room at WKPN, our little AM station out past the grain elevators. I fix the antenna when the wind takes it down. I log the weather reports at 5 every morning. Most folks in town think I'm just the old maintenance man who keeps the signal from dying. That was never the whole truth. My late wife Ruth started that station in a converted grain shed. She grew up on a farm 3 miles from here, out past the county line. When she was a girl, a flood took the bridge and cut her family off for 6 days. No one could reach them. No one even knew to try. She swore that if she ever had the means, she'd build something for it. Something that would never let a family go silent like that again. When a small inheritance came her way in the 70s, she bought a used transmitter and a used license. I helped her wire the shed with my own 2 hands. I remember the night we signed the paperwork for that license. We sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp burning. Ruth kept running her thumb over the seal like it might smudge. She told me something I'd never heard before. Her father had stood on their porch during that flood, shouting into the dark for help that never came. She said a radio station wasn't really about music or news. It was about making sure nobody's voice ever went unheard again, especially in a storm. We built the emergency broadcast protocol into the station's charter that same year. Free airtime for any family searching for someone lost in bad weather. Nobody outside our kitchen ever knew that idea started with her. Ruth passed 9 years ago. I kept running the station exactly the way she always did. Local high school football on Friday nights. Farm reports at 6. Storm warnings the second the sirens went quiet. I never told our granddaughter Adley the details of who actually held the license. She was still small when Ruth built the place. By the time she was grown, she'd already left for the city to study business. Radio must have looked like a relic to her. She calls most Sundays. I'm proud of her, even when her ambition worries me some. There was a hard year, about 6 years back, when the station nearly folded anyway. Advertising had dried up and the transmitter needed parts I couldn't afford. I sat with the accountant one evening and the numbers were bleak. I nearly let the license lapse quietly. The way a tired man lets go of a fight that feels too big for him alone. Then a woman drove up from 3 counties over just to shake my hand. She said our storm coverage was the only reason her family found each other after the 19 tornado. She had no idea I owned a thing. She just wanted to thank whoever kept that signal on. I went home and sold my truck that week to keep the tower standing. Ruth would have done the same without a second thought. Sal told me the filing was set for a hearing that Thursday. A media conglomerate wanted to buy the license and repurpose our tower for cell service. He didn't know yet that the executive pushing the deal was my own granddaughter. I put on my good jacket and drove to the county courthouse annex where they held the hearing. I sat in the back row. The same way I've sat behind that transmitter for 40 years, watching a signal do its quiet work. Adley stood at the podium in a sharp navy blazer, clicking through a slide deck. She called Kuppen a legacy asset with negligible listenership and no strategic value. The company, she said, would benefit far more from converting the tower into a 5G relay. A commissioner asked who currently held the broadcast license. Adley said, "It's held by some elderly local operator. We've been in talks about a straightforward buyout offer." She said it so easily. She had no idea the elderly operator she meant was sitting 6 rows behind her in a folding chair. I sat there and listened to my granddaughter describe her grandmother's life's work as negligible. Something old and tired rose up in my chest. Not sharp anger. The quiet kind that comes from watching someone erase a person you loved without even realizing it. I stood up. I walked to the front. I didn't raise my voice. I never have needed to in this county. Everyone in that room has heard my voice reading storm warnings at dawn for decades. I set a folder on the podium beside Adley. Inside it was the original license and a photograph of Ruth standing in front of the grain shed the week we signed for it. "I'm the license holder," I said. "Nathaniel Voss. UKPN was founded by my late wife, Ruth Voss. Your grandmother." Adley turned. Her face moved through 3 things at once. Confusion, then recognition, then something like the floor giving way. "Grandpa?" she said, barely above a whisper. The room heard it anyway. I told the commission the truth, plainly. I told them Ruth built that station with a used transmitter and a promise to her own father. It exists to make sure no family in this county ever goes unheard in a storm again. I told them the emergency protocol was hers, not a regulation, a promise. I wasn't angry when I said it. I didn't need to be. The facts did what facts do, after 40 years of quietly making sure they stayed true. The commission tabled the sale that afternoon. Adley didn't speak to me on the way out. She left through the side door of the annex. She called me 3 days later. Not an apology outright, not at first. She told me about the quarterly targets her firm had set for tower acquisitions. The pressure to close deals fast in rural counties nobody at headquarters had ever visited. This one had looked like an easy win, a station with a low listener count and a tired old caretaker. She'd never once asked who that caretaker was. I told her plainly I would have told her everything if she'd simply asked, instead of building a pitch deck around her own grandmother's legacy without knowing it. We talked a long while that night, longer than we had in years. She asked, quietly, if she could come see the station properly. Not as an executive scouting a tower. As Ruth's granddaughter. She drove out the following weekend. I walked her through the transmitter room, showed her the logbooks Ruth kept in her own handwriting, going back decades. I played her the tape of the 19 tornado broadcast, my own voice cracking as I read names of families still searching for each other. She stood by that old console a long time, looking at the dials her grandmother once turned by hand. She didn't fix everything overnight, but within a month, she'd pulled her firm's offer off the table entirely. She came back with a different proposal instead. A grant to modernize our aging equipment, funded partly from her own signing bonus. No ownership change anywhere in the paperwork. She didn't ask for her name on it. She just wanted the signal to keep reaching people, the way her grandmother built it to. I still climb that tower ladder most mornings to check the guy wires. Most folks in town still just see the old maintenance man, and that suits me fine. The license still bears my late wife's name, held exactly the way we set it up all those years ago. Ruth never got to see this. She never got to see her granddaughter finally understand what that little station actually meant. But every family caught in a storm out here still hears a voice telling them where to find shelter and where to find each other. I didn't fight for that license for a plaque or a headline. I fought for it because it was the last place I could still hear Ruth's own promise, kept out loud every single morning. I wasn't going to let anyone, even our own granddaughter, silence that without a fight. If tonight's story moved you, hit subscribe and stay with us here at The Forgotten Father. Tell me in the comments. If you found out someone you loved was about to sell off the thing that held your whole town together, would you have stayed quiet in the back row or walked up with the deed the way I did? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for spending this evening with me. I'll see you in the next story.